In this example, it states, suppose you visit a Baskin-Robbins ice cream store. Using the fundamental counting principle, determine how many possible ways you can order an ice cream cone if the choices are 2 different types of cone, that's a cake or a sugar, 31 flavors of ice cream, that's what Baskin-Robbins is known for, and 4 different toppings. And here we have nuts, fudge, butterscotch, or candy sprinkles. Now, something I need to point out here is the fundamental counting principle. The word fundamental means basic. It's very basic. Sometimes it's so basic that we tend to neglect it. But what the fundamental counting principle says is that if we have so many outcomes or so many ways of doing one thing, we could label it as M, and there are so many different outcomes or so many different ways of doing another thing, and we could label that as N, then how many ways can these occur together? Well, we simply multiply. Multiplication is a convenient way of being able to tally things up very quickly. So for example, if I was to flip a quarter and roll a die, how many outcomes would there be altogether? Well, there's 2 outcomes on the flip of a quarter, and there's 6 possible outcomes on the roll of a die. So if I was to flip a quarter and roll a die at the same time, how many outcomes would there be? There would be 12, 2 times 6. Now we are going to be utilizing the fundamental counting principle throughout this chapter, so it's good to keep that in perspective. So for this particular one, we'll read it again. It says, suppose you visit a Baskin-Robbins ice cream store. Using the fundamental counting principle, determine how many possible ways you can order an ice cream cone if the choices are 2 different types of cone, 31 flavors of ice cream, and 4 different toppings. So we have 2 different cones, 31 flavors of ice cream, and then 4 different toppings. So how many ways can we order a cone? Well, then we could just go ahead and multiply. 2 times 31 times 4, that's 248 different ways that we can order a cone. Now, the beauty of the fundamental counting principle is we could certainly make a tree diagram of this. If I said, here's the ice cream cone that we're going to choose, I could go ahead and I can make the 2 different types of cone. Here's a cake cone, and here's a sugar cone. But then branching from each one of these, I would have to branch off 31 times for each one. I would have to have 31 branches here going to each one of the 31 different flavors, and I'd have to do the same for this one here. Not only that, but from each one of these individual branches, I would have to branch off 4 different times for the different toppings. Eventually, if we were able to do that, there would be 248 different listings here that would certainly reflect the number of possible ice cream cones. Well, that would be very impractical to use a tree diagram to do that. So that's where the fundamental counting principle comes in. And again, we're certainly going to use that throughout this chapter.